Captain Amanda Reynolds stood at the bridge of the EN's Thunderchild, her fingers drumming a steady rhythm on the polished titanium railing. The massive view screen before her showed nothing but the endless black of space, punctuated by the distant gleam of stars. She knew, however, that they weren't alone. Varsidian observation post holding steady at Mark 247. Lieutenant Cooper reported from his sensor station, his voice carrying the kind of tension usually reserved for first dates and bomb disposal. They're still running active scans. Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. Let them scan. Let them see exactly what humanity had built. The Thunderchild represented humanity's first true venture into interstellar warship design, but not in the way the aliens expected. While the Varsidians and their Galactic Council allies had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and shield systems, humanity had taken a different approach entirely. Engineering reports all systems nominal. Commander Thompson's voice crackled over the comm. Mass drivers 1 through 6 are powered down but ready. Reaction mass at optimal temperature. The pride in her voice was evident. She'd spent 5 years helping design those primitive weapons, and she knew exactly what they could do. The Varsidian observation post was exactly where intelligence said it would be, lurking at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, monitoring humanity's quaint efforts at space travel. They'd been watching Earth for decades, dismissing humans as barely spacefaring primitives who hadn't even managed to crack the energy shield problem. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Tactical. Reynolds called out, "Power up Mass Driver 1. Minimal charge only. Let's give our audience something to think about." Lieutenant Michael Martinez's hands flew across his console. Mass Driver 1 powering up. Captain. 20% capacity. He paused, checking his readings. "Ma'am, the Varsidian post is showing elevated energy signatures. I think we scared them." "Good," Reynolds replied, standing straighter. "That's exactly what we want." The Thunderchild didn't look like other species' warships, where they were sleek and elegant, bristling with energy projectors and shield emitters. The human vessel was angular and brutalist. Its hull was thick with layers of reactive armor and void spaces, designed to absorb and dissipate impacts rather than deflect them. But its most distinctive features were the 6 massive railguns, the Mark VI hypervelocity mass drivers, running the length of the ship like enormous rifle barrels. "Captain," Cooper called out, his voice rising with excitement, "they're broadcasting on all frequencies. I think they're trying to warn us about our reactor leak." The bridge crew chuckled. The alien sensors were interpreting the mass driver's magnetic field as a containment failure. They had no frame of reference for a weapon that simply threw things really, really fast. "Open a channel," Reynolds ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." The view screen flickered, revealing a cluster of alarmed-looking Varsidians. Their iridescent scales shifted colors rapidly, a sign of agitation, according to the xenobiologists. "This is Captain Amanda Reynolds of the Earth naval ship Thunderchild," she announced, keeping her voice steady and professional. "We appreciate your concern, but I assure you our systems are functioning exactly as designed." The lead Varsidian, its scales now a confused mix of green and purple, responded in carefully translated English. "Human vessel, our scans indicate a dangerous power buildup in your primary systems. We strongly advise immediate shutdown to prevent catastrophic failure." Reynolds allowed her smile to widen just slightly. "What you're detecting is not a malfunction. Would you like a demonstration?" Without waiting for a response, she nodded to Martinez. "Target the derelict mining drone at coordinates Mark 310, 1% power. Show them what primitive looks like." The Thunderchild shuddered almost imperceptibly as Mass Driver 1 fired. A tungsten rod, barely the size of a pencil, accelerated to a fraction of its maximum velocity, crossed 50,000 kilometers in seconds, and turned the abandoned drone into an expanding cloud of superheated debris. The Varsidians fell silent. Their scales had all shifted to white, the color of shock. "As you can see," Reynolds continued pleasantly, "everything is working perfectly. Thunderchild out. As the channel closed, she turned to her crew. "Send the data burst to command." Message reads, "First contact protocols successfully broken." "They've noticed us." The bridge crew tried to maintain their professional composure, but she could see the pride in their faces. Humanity had just announced its presence on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. Multiple contacts, bearing 310 Mark II. Lieutenant Cooper's voice cut through the quiet hum of the Thunderchild's bridge. His hands danced across the sensor display as he refined the readings. 7 vessels, Xanthi configuration. They're running hot. Captain Reynolds leaned forward in her command chair, eyes narrowing. The Xanthi weren't supposed to be in this sector. Their presence near the refugee convoy routes could only mean one thing. "Show me," she ordered. The main display lit up with a tactical overview. 7 red markers blazed against the starfield, their vector intersecting with a cluster of green dots representing the civilian ships they were escorting. "They're operating in a standard raider pattern," Lieutenant Martinez observed from his tactical station. "Looks like they haven't spotted us yet." He paused, a grim smile crossing his face. "Their energy shields are up, but they haven't charged their main weapons." Reynolds nodded. Of course they hadn't. Why would the mighty Xanthi fear a single primitive human vessel? "All hands, battle stations," she commanded, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "Engineering. Begin charging mass drivers 2 through 5. Martinez, plot me a solution that keeps the civilians out of our firing lines." The bridge erupted into controlled activity. Warning lights shifted from blue to red as the Thunderchild's crew prepared for their first real combat engagement. "Captain," Cooper called out, "they're broadcasting." He hesitated, then added, in the clear, on all frequencies. They're laughing at us. Put it through." The harsh, clicking language of the Xanthi filled the bridge, translated in real time by the ship's computers. "Human vessel, your presence is noted. Remove yourself from this space or be destroyed. Your primitive construction cannot hope to match our technology." Reynolds shared a knowing look with her crew. The Xanthi, like most galactic species, relied on energy weapons and shields. They had no concept of what they were facing. "Steady as she goes," Reynolds ordered. "Cooper, send the evacuation signal to the civilian ships. Have them form up behind us." "Martinez, status on those solutions." "Mass drivers charged to 60%, Captain. I have solutions for their 3 lead ships. They're still not taking evasive action." Martinez's voice held a note of professional satisfaction. "They really think we're harmless." The Xanthi ships drew closer, their formation tight and professional. Energy readings showed their shields at maximum, ready to deflect any primitive energy weapons the humans might possess. "Let's show them something new," Reynolds said. "Target their lead vessel. Mass Driver 2, 20% power. No need to waste a full charge on this lesson." The Thunderchild's hull vibrated slightly as one of its massive railguns aligned. The magnetic coils hummed with power, preparing to launch a tungsten rod at a significant fraction of light speed. "The Xanthi are signaling again," Cooper reported. They're asking if we need help with our obvious engine malfunction." He couldn't keep the amusement from his voice. Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. "Send them our thanks for their concern. Martinez, you may fire when ready." The mass driver's discharge was almost anticlimactic. A simple thud, a brief flash, and the tungsten rod was away, crossing the space between ships in mere seconds. On the main display, the lead Xanthi ship's icon simply vanished. Where a mighty raider had been, only expanding debris remained. Their energy shields, designed to stop plasma and laser fire, had offered no more resistance than tissue paper to the hypersonic projectile. Silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the steady beep of sensors tracking the remaining raiders. "Target is eliminated," Martinez reported, his professional tone not quite hiding his awe. Remaining vessels are breaking formation. They appear to be in shock. "Open a channel," Reynolds commanded. When the link was established, she spoke clearly and calmly. "Xanthi vessels, this is Captain Reynolds of the ENS Thunderchild. That was a warning shot. You have 30 seconds to power down your systems and surrender, or we will demonstrate what these weapons can do at full power." The response was immediate. 6 sets of energy signatures dropped to minimal levels as the raiders rushed to comply. "Well done, everyone," Reynolds said, allowing pride to color her voice. "Cooper, signal command. Tell them the field test was a complete success. And add a note. We're going to need more tungsten." Commander Lisa Thompson watched the battle unfold from her engineering station, her years of theoretical work coming to life on the tactical display. The remaining Xanthi ships had recovered from their initial shock and were now attempting to coordinate air response. "They're trying to establish a layered defense," she reported, reading through the sensor data. "Overlapping shield harmonics. It's actually quite clever." She allowed herself a small smile. "Too bad it won't make any difference." Captain Reynolds nodded, her eyes fixed on the main display. "Talk me through it, Commander. What are we looking at?" "Their shields are energy-based constructs," Thompson explained, pulling up a detailed analysis. "Designed to disperse and deflect plasma, lasers, even antimatter reactions. But they're about to learn a lesson in basic physics. You can't deflect mass with energy alone." The Xanthi vessels had arranged themselves in a defensive formation, their shield systems creating a supposedly impenetrable barrier of overlapping energy fields. Their weapons, advanced plasma projectors and quantum disruptors, were charging, ready to unleash hell on the primitive human vessel. "Multiple enemy locks," Lieutenant Cooper called out from his station. "They're targeting our primary hull sections. Looks like they think they figured out our weak points." Martin snorted from his tactical station. "They're still looking for energy shield projectors. Haven't even realized what our armor actually is." Thompson nodded in agreement. The Thunderchild's hull was a masterpiece of materials engineering. Layers of reactive armor, void spaces, and impact-absorbing compounds. No energy shields, just pure Newtonian physics and smart design. "Mass drivers 3 through 6 are hot," Martins reported. "Solution plotted for maximum effect. Permission to show them why mass times velocity squared is more than just a theory." Reynolds raised an eyebrow at Thompson. "Commander, your weapons, your call." Thompson straightened in her chair. 5 years of research, countless simulations, and endless arguments with the Admiralty had led to this moment. "Fire sequence Alpha 3. Let's make this educational." The Thunderchild shuddered as 4 mass drivers fired in rapid succession, each launching a carefully calculated spread of tungsten rods. The projectiles, accelerated to 0.15 c, crossed the space between ships in the blink of an eye. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The results were spectacular. The first rod struck the leading edge of the Xanthi shield formation, and physics took over. The shield, designed to handle energy weapons, tried to respond to the kinetic impact. But you can't stop mass with energy alone. The rod passed through unimpeded, its relativistic speed turning it into a lance of pure destruction. "First target eliminated," Martins reported clinically. "Secondary impacts registering. Third target. Fourth." On the display, the Xanthi formation came apart like a house of cards. Their sophisticated shields might as well have been soap bubbles against the Thunderchild's weapons. One ship, struck by a glancing blow, spun out of control as its hull split open to space. "Enemy vessels attempting to retreat," Cooper announced. They're broadcasting a general distress call, warning all ships about, quote, impossible human weapons. Thompson allowed herself a moment of professional pride. "Not impossible," she corrected. Just good old-fashioned physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. No amount of energy shielding can argue with that. Stand down to Condition 2, Reynolds ordered. Martinez, maintain target solutions but hold fire. Cooper, make sure you're recording all their transmissions. Command will want every detail of how their shields failed. Already on it, Captain, Cooper responded. The Varsidian observation post is going crazy with readings. They're requesting permission to approach and study the debris field. Reynolds shared an amused look with Thompson. Granted, let them see exactly what happens when you bring energy shields to a kinetic fight. Thompson turned back to her readings, already composing her report in her head. The battle had proven every theory, validated every simulation. Humanity's first real space battle had lasted less than 5 minutes, and they'd just rewritten every rule of space combat. You know what this means, she said quietly to Reynolds. Every defense system in known space is optimized against the wrong type of weapon. Reynolds nodded, a slight smile playing at her lips. Inform command. Tell them the field test exceeded all parameters. And add a personal note. The galaxy's about to get very interesting. Admiral Thomas Walker stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session, his weathered face betraying no emotion as the massive chamber erupted in chaos. The holographic display behind him showed the Thunderchild's battle footage on an endless loop, each frame adding to the growing panic among the assembled representatives. Distinguished members of the Council, he began, his voice cutting through the commotion. I understand this is unsettling, but perhaps we could address your questions in a more organized fashion. The Varsidian High Commissioner, scales flickering between anxious purple and diplomatic blue, spoke first. Admiral Walker, our analysis teams have reviewed this footage 12 times. They insist what we're seeing should be impossible. No pre-FTL civilization should be capable of such weapons development. Walker allowed himself a small smile. With all due respect, Commissioner, that's because you're looking at it through the wrong lens. We didn't develop new weapons. We simply applied basic physics on a larger scale. The chamber's central display shifted to show technical readouts of the mass drivers. Several council members visibly recoiled at their apparent simplicity. But these are just magnetic acceleration tubes. The Xanthi representative sputtered, their ceremonial combat shields buzzing with agitation. Barely more advanced than primitive coil guns. Our analysis suggested they were merely backup propulsion systems. An understandable mistake, Walker replied, stepping closer to the display. You were looking for energy weapons, shield emitters, quantum disruptors. Instead, we built what you might call a very, very fast gun. The Martanian science director leaned forward, their crystalline form refracting light, in patterns of intense interest. The velocities involved, the kinetic energy at impact would be equivalent to a small nuclear detonation. Walker finished. Yes, as it turns out, if you throw something hard enough, energy shields become rather irrelevant. New images appeared on the display, orbital defense platforms around various worlds, their specifications scrolling past. Walker watched as understanding dawned on the assembled aliens' faces. Every major defense system in known space, he continued, his voice gentle but firm, is optimized against energy weapons. Every shield, every countermeasure, every early warning system, all designed to stop things that glow. The silence in the chamber was deafening. We've reviewed your classified defense archives, Walker added, drawing shocked gasps. Yes, the ones you thought were secure. It seems your encryption was based on the same principles as your shields. Elegant, advanced, and completely unprepared for simple brute force approaches. The proxy war coordinator, their tentacles writhing with calculations, spoke up. Our preliminary analysis suggests that 97% of all galactic military installations are vulnerable to these. Kinetic kill vehicles, Walker supplied helpfully, or as Captain Reynolds likes to call them, rocks going really fast. This changes everything, the Varsidian commissioner whispered. Every defense treaty, every balance of power. Walker nodded, which is why I'm here. Earth is formally requesting membership in the Galactic Council, not because we need protection, but because we'd rather be friends than, well, he let the implication hang in the air. And the Thunderchild? The Xanthi representative asked, their voice unusually subdued. Is it the only one? Walker's smile widened slightly. The Thunderchild is our first test platform. Consider it a proof of concept. The Unity-class production line begins operations next month. We plan to launch one every 60 days. The chamber erupted again, but Walker held up his hand. Members of the Council, we don't share this to threaten. We share this because we believe in transparency with our future allies. Humanity doesn't want war. We've had enough of that at home. What we want is a seat at the table. He paused, looking each council member in the eye. And perhaps, if you're interested, we could help you redesign some of those defense systems. After all, we're pretty good at thinking outside the box. The Varsidian commissioner's scales had settled on a deep, thoughtful green. All those in favor of fast-tracking Earth's membership application. Every hand, tentacle, and appendage in the chamber rose immediately. Walker nodded, satisfied. Sometimes the best diplomacy was simply showing people what they'd overlooked. And humanity, it seemed, had a talent for finding the gaps in everyone's assumptions. The Galactic Science Academy's Grand Lecture Hall had never been this crowded. Representatives from every major species packed, the tiered seating, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of colors and textures. Dr. Emily Harrison stood at the podium, her simple Blue Earth Navy Science Division uniform standing out among the elaborate robes and ceremonial attire of the assembled xenoscientists. Before we begin, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, I'd like to address the most common question I've received since arriving. Why didn't we just copy your shield technology? She paused, looking around the room. The answer is simple. We did try. We failed. And that failure led us to something better. The holographic display behind her sprang to life, showing the early prototypes of human shield systems. Every attempt to replicate energy-based defenses failed, she continued. Our understanding of quantum fields was too limited, our technology too crude. So we asked a different question. What if we don't need to stop the energy at all? The display shifted to show a cross-section of the Thunderchild's hull. This is what we call reactive layered architecture, Harrison explained, highlighting different sections. Instead of trying to create an energy barrier, we built something that could take a hit. Multiple hits, actually. Each layer has a specific purpose. Some absorb, some deflect, some simply give way in a controlled fashion. A Martanian scientist raised their crystalline appendage. But surely the energy requirements for moving such mass would be prohibitive. Harrison smiled. That's the beautiful part. It's actually more efficient than shield systems. No constant power drain, no field harmonics to maintain. Just good old-fashioned armor, designed with modern material science. She switched the display to show the mass driver systems. Now for the part you're all really here to see. Her expression grew more animated. The Mark VII hypervelocity mass driver is, at its core, a very simple device. We take a dense object, accelerate it to a significant fraction of light speed, and let physics do the rest. The assembled scientists watched in stunned silence as she played footage from the weapon's development. The real innovation isn't in the launcher, Harrison continued. It's in the projectiles themselves. Each rod is a masterpiece of metallurgy and aerodynamics, designed to maintain structural integrity at velocities that would vaporize lesser materials. A Xanthi weapons researcher spoke up, their voice trembling slightly. Our analysis shows the impact energy exceeding several dozen terajoules. How do you achieve such acceleration without tearing the ship apart? Excellent question. Harrison beamed. The recoil management system is actually my favorite part. We adapted the principle from old naval rifle designs, just scaled up about 10,000 times. She brought up the technical schematics, showing the intricate network of shock absorbers and inertial dampeners. The entire ship acts as a giant recoil absorption system, she explained. Every frame, every bulkhead, even the crew quarters are designed to channel and dissipate the force. It's like a giant spring, really. The Varsidian chief scientist's scales had turned a pale yellow of academic fascination. And the targeting systems. At these velocities, the computational requirements must be enormous. Actually, Harrison said, that was one of our bigger breakthroughs. We don't try to track the target's energy emissions or shield harmonics. Instead, we built what we call a ballistic solution computer. It's based on old artillery tables, just with a lot more math. She pulled up the targeting algorithm's base code, drawing gasps from the audience. Yes, those are Newtonian physics equations, she confirmed. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. We found that by keeping things simple, we actually achieved better accuracy than more complex systems. A junior scientist in the back raised their appendage. But this is all so primitive. Harrison's smile widened. Primitive doesn't mean ineffective. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. After all, she added, her eyes twinkling, you can't argue with results. The room fell silent as she showed the final piece of footage. The Thunderchild's battle with the Xanthi Raiders, now famous throughout the galaxy. In conclusion, Harrison said, we'd be happy to share our research with the academic community. After all, science is about building on each other's work. And perhaps, she added with a slight smirk, it's time for some of our more advanced friends to get back to basics. Major Kevin Richardson stood in the center of the holographic training chamber, surrounded by the most distinguished military officers from 12 different species. The virtual environment around them showed a vast expanse of blue. The Pacific Ocean, circa 1942. Gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying the no-nonsense tone of a career Marine. Welcome to what we call the Naval Combat Heritage Program. Today's lesson begins not in space, but in water. The alien officers exchanged confused looks. A Xanthi fleet commander raised a clawed appendage. Major, we were promised insights into human space combat doctrine. Why are we looking at your planet's oceans? Richardson smiled. Because this, he gestured to the holographic waves, is where we learned everything we know about three-dimensional combat. Computer, initialize midway scenario. The scene changed dramatically. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, and submarines appeared around them, locked in the famous battle that changed the course of human history. Notice the layers, Richardson pointed out. Submarines below, surface ships in the middle, aircraft above. Three-dimensional combat zones, each with their own rules, all interconnected. A Varsidian admiral's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. Like the layers of space combat, gravitational wells, standard orbital paths, and deep space. Exactly, Richardson nodded. We've been fighting in 3 dimensions since before we had electricity. Computer, show battle of Jutland formation analysis. The scene changed again, showing complex naval formations from World War I. Richardson walked through the holographic ships, pointing out key elements. Crossing the T, tactical advantages of solar positioning, using celestial bodies as cover. We didn't have to invent space combat tactics. We just had to adapt what we already knew. The Praxi War Coordinator's tentacles writhed in sudden understanding. The Thunderchild's attack pattern. It wasn't random. You were using these ancient water combat techniques. Modified for 3-dimensional space, yes, Richardson confirmed. Computer, split screen. Show Thunderchild's approach vector alongside the Battle of Leak Gulf. The comparison drew gasps from the assembled officers. The parallels were undeniable. But this is... The Martanian general's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. This is why you succeeded where our simulations said you should fail. We were playing an entirely different game. Richardson nodded. Your combat doctrine evolved from planetary defense, stationary fortifications, energy screens, point defense networks. Ours came from blue water navies. We never think in terms of fixed positions. He gestured, and the display changed to show the Thunderchild's internal layout. Even our ship design reflects this heritage. We still call them decks, still use naval terminology. The mass drivers. They're just very, very big naval rifles. The reactive armor. Inspired by torpedo protection systems from the 1920s, the Xanthi commander had gone very still. Your entire civilization. You've been preparing for space combat without knowing it. Not deliberately, Richardson admitted, but every naval battle in our history taught us something that applies to space. Computer, show Atlantic convoy defense formations. The scene changed again, showing merchant ships surrounded by escorts. Look familiar? He asked. It should. It's the same formation we used to protect those civilian ships from your raiders. The Varsidian admiral's scales had shifted to a deep purple of respect. You're not teaching us new tactics, they realized. You're teaching us history. The principles of combat don't change, Richardson confirmed. Whether you're fighting on water, in air, or in space, the basics remain the same. Position, timing, three-dimensional thinking. He paused the simulation, turning to face his audience directly. That's why the Thunderchild won. Not because our technology was better, it wasn't, but because we've been fighting battles like that for centuries. We don't need computer predictions or energy field calculations. We just needed to remember what we already knew. The alien officers were silent, processing this revelation. Finally, the Praxi War Coordinator spoke. Major, they said slowly, we would like to see more of these historical battles. Perhaps we have been too quick to dismiss the lessons of the past. Richardson smiled. Computer, initialize Operation Overlord scenario. Let me show you how we really learn to fight. Lieutenant Ashley Parker stood at her station on the Thunderchild's bridge, managing the latest flood of diplomatic requests. The ship had been on its galactic tour for 3 weeks, and each stop generated more interest than the last. Captain, she called out, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. The Praxi Defense Fleet is requesting another demonstration. Apparently, their war coordinator didn't believe the sensor readings from the first one. Captain Reynolds looked up from her reports, a slight smile playing at her lips. Tell them we'll oblige. But this time, let's give them something new to think about. Martinez, do you still have that asteroid training program ready? Lieutenant Martinez grinned from his tactical station. Yes, Mom. The one where we split it into perfect thirds. That's the one. Parker, inform the Praxi that we'll demonstrate our precision targeting capabilities. Let's show them that these crude weapons can be surgical when needed. The message was sent, and the alien fleet moved into observation position. The Thunderchild's presence had been having this effect across the galaxy. Every defense force wanted to see the human ship in action, even as they scrambled to update their own defensive systems. Incoming transmission from the Varsidian Academy, Parker announced. They're offering full scholarships to 20 Earth naval officers for their Advanced Strategic Studies program. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. And what do they want in exchange? They're requesting permission to send their top tactical analysts to observe our basic training programs. Specifically, they want to study how we, quote, develop such unconventional strategic thinking in your junior officers. Commander Thompson chuckled from her engineering station. They still don't get it, do they? They think there's some secret training program, when really it's just centuries of naval tradition and practical experience. The bridge crew shared knowing looks. Every stop on their tour had revealed the same pattern. Advanced civilizations struggling to understand how a primitive species had so thoroughly upended their military doctrine. New contact, Cooper called out from sensors. Somthi diplomatic vessel requesting permission to approach. They're flying a white flag, Captain. Now that's interesting, Reynolds mused. They've actually researched old Earth surrender protocols. Parker, what's their story? Parker quickly scanned the incoming message. They're requesting to observe our upcoming demonstration. But there's more. They're offering to share their advanced shield technology in exchange for, oh, this is rich, basic training in human tactical thinking. The mighty Xanthi want lessons in basic tactics. Martins whistled. Never thought I'd see the day. Reynolds considered for a moment. Grant their request. But Parker, make sure they understand, this isn't about technology exchange. If they want to learn, they need to start from the beginning. Naval history, three-dimensional combat theory, the works. Already drafting the response, Captain. Parker's fingers flew over her console. I'm also getting updates from Earth. The first classes of alien military officers have started their training at Annapolis. Apparently, the sight of a Varsidian admiral learning to sail a traditional naval vessel is quite something. It makes perfect sense, though, Thompson added. You can't understand space combat without understanding its roots. They're finally figuring out what we've known all along. The principles don't change, just the scale. The main display showed the gathering fleet of observation vessels. Each stop on their tour had attracted more attention. The Thunderchild, once dismissed as a primitive curiosity, had become the most studied ship in the galaxy. Captain, Parker said, her voice more serious. Message from Admiral Walker. The Council has approved our proposal for the Joint Military Training Initiative. We're to begin preparations for the first Galactic Naval Academy, based on Earth. Reynolds nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. Send our acknowledgement. And Parker, add a personal note. Tell him the Thunderchild's diplomatic tour has exceeded all expectations. It turns out the best way to make friends is to show them exactly what you're capable of. And maybe, Martins added with a grin, remind them that there's still value in the basics. The bridge crew watched as the Praxi fleet moved into position for the demonstration. Soon, they would once again show the galaxy that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. And this time, their audience was actually ready to learn. The Galactic Defense Summit's main docking ring had never seen a ship quite like the Thunderchild. It sat among the sleek, energy-shielded vessels of 100 species, its angular hull and massive mass drivers, a testament to humanity's different approach to space combat. Captain Reynolds stood at the observation window of the summit's grand chamber, watching as another human vessel emerged from FTL, the ENS Dauntless, second of the Unity class. Even at this distance, its presence caused the nearby defense platforms to automatically reorient themselves. Quite a sight, isn't it? Admiral Walker said, joining her at the window. 2 months ago, they would have seen those ships as primitive curiosities. Now they're scrambling to redesign their entire defense doctrine. Reynolds nodded, noting how the alien vessels gave both human ships a respectfully wide berth. The latest batch of status reports just came in, she said. 17 species have already started construction on their own mass driver platforms. The Varsidians are leading the pack. Turns out they're quick studies when it comes to kinetic warfare. At the joint training programs, beyond all expectations, sir. The first class of alien officers just completed their basic naval history course. You should have seen their faces when we took them out on the ocean. The Praxi War Coordinator actually got seasick. Walker chuckled, but his expression quickly turned serious. The Council's Military Advisory Board is meeting in 10 minutes. They're going to want to know about the production schedule for the rest of the Unity class. Should I be concerned? Reynolds asked, though her slight smile suggested she already knew the answer. Quite the opposite. They're not worried about us building too many ships. They're worried we're not building them fast enough. The rimward sectors are requesting permanent human naval presence for their defense fleets. The chamber's main doors opened, admitting a stream of high-ranking officers from across the galaxy. Many nodded respectfully to Walker and Reynolds. The days of dismissing human military leadership were long gone. Lieutenant Parker approached with a datapad. Final numbers from the Technology Exchange Program. Captain, 23 species have shared their shield designs with us, and 31 have requested our assistance with kinetic weapon development. And the cultural exchange? Walker asked. Even better. The first Galactic Naval Academy's campus on Earth is already at double its projected enrollment. We've had to fast-track construction of the underwater training facility. Turns out many species never considered the value of submariner tactics in space combat. Reynolds watched as the Dauntless maneuvered into its docking position, its movement precise and deliberate. Have they announced the joint exercise schedule yet? Yes, Mom. The Thunderchild will lead the first combined fleet exercise next month. 12 species participating, with more on the waiting list. They're particularly keen to learn what you call old-school naval maneuvers in a space environment. The chamber's massive holoscreen activated, showing the current state of galactic defense readiness. The map was very different from just a few months ago. Hybrid defense systems were appearing everywhere, combining traditional energy shields with human-inspired kinetic defenses. It's not just about the weapons anymore, Reynolds observed. They're starting to understand the whole package. The history, the tradition, the way of thinking that comes from centuries of naval combat experience. Walker nodded. That's the real victory here. We didn't just show up with better weapons. We showed up with a better way of understanding space combat itself. And now they're all going back to basic training, Reynolds finished, a note of pride in her voice. The chamber's announcement system chimed, calling the meeting to order. As the assembled officers took their seats, Reynolds noted how natural it felt. Humans and aliens together, each learning from the other's strengths. Time to make it official, Walker said, heading for the podium. The galaxy's first true combined defense fleet. Reynolds took her place among the other fleet commanders, the Thunderchild's presence outside a reminder of how far they'd come. From dismissed primitives to respected teachers, all because they'd stuck to their roots and trusted in centuries of hard-won experience. Just remember, she whispered to Parker as the session began, sometimes the most advanced solution is the one that's been working all along. Outside, the Thunderchild and Dauntless stood watch, their massive mass drivers a testament to the simple truth that had changed the galaxy. Sometimes, the old ways were still the best ways.